I'm Tessa, 32 years old, and family meant everything to me. Growing up in Michigan, I believed blood ties were unbreakable despite my parents' strict expectations. As a successful graphic designer in Chicago, I still craved their approval, trying to prove my worth. Until that message appeared on my phone one cold November evening. My father's words glowed harsh against the screen. "We've all agreed, stay out of the family now." In that moment, everything changed. Before I share how I turned my family's rejection into my greatest triumph, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. This story might just give you the courage you need to stand up for yourself, too. Family was supposed to be your foundation, your bedrock of support. At least that's what I always believed growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Our house was like many others on Maple Street: perfect lawn-trimmed hedges and a facade that revealed nothing of what happened inside. My father, James Wilson, ruled our household with the same precision and authority he wielded at his corporate law firm. Tall, with prematurely gray hair that only added to his intimidating presence, he had a way of looking at you that made you feel instantly judged and usually found wanting. His expectations weren't just high, they were specific. Success meant following his definition: prestigious college practical degree, respectable career, proper marriage rite, neighborhood. Deviations weren't tolerated. My mother, Diana, was beautiful in a classic way, always perfectly dressed and coiffed even just to make breakfast. She'd once had dreams of becoming a journalist but abandoned them when she married my father. Instead, she channeled her energy into maintaining our picture-perfect family image. She rarely disagreed with my father directly, though sometimes I'd catch her giving me sympathetic glances when his criticism became particularly harsh. But she never intervened. Then there were my siblings. Mark, 4 years older than me, was the golden child. He followed our father's path precisely. Top of his class, Yale Law School, joined a prestigious firm, married his equally accomplished college sweetheart, Catherine. My father beamed with pride at every milestone Mark achieved, and Mark soaked up the approval like a sponge, becoming more like our father with each passing year. My younger sister, Amelia, was 2 years behind me, and somehow managed to be both my father's perfect daughter while still maintaining his approval. She was pretty in the conventional way our parents valued, got excellent grades without seeming to try too hard, and became an elementary school teacher, just nurturing enough to fulfill traditional expectations while still being respectable. She married her high school boyfriend, Thomas, who came from good family, as my father would say, and they settled just 20 minutes from my parents. And then there was me, Tessa Wilson, the middle child, the artist, the disappointment. From my earliest memories, I knew I was different. While Mark memorized multiplication tables and Amelia practiced piano, I was drawing elaborate worlds on any surface I could find. My parents' refrigerator was never adorned with my artwork. Instead, those creations were quickly shuffled away to make room for Mark's perfect test scores and Amelia's certificates of achievement. "Art is a hobby, Tessa, not a career," my father would say whenever he caught me sketching. "You need something practical to fall back on." I still remember my 12th birthday when Aunt Lorraine gave me an expensive set of professional colored pencils. The joy I felt was overwhelming. Finally, tools worthy of the images in my head. But later that night, I overheard my father berating my aunt. "Don't encourage this nonsense, Lorraine. She already has her head in the clouds. The last thing she needs is to think she can make a living doodling." The pencils mysteriously disappeared a week later. When I asked my mother about them, she just said, "I'm sure they'll turn up," with that tight smile that meant the subject was closed. Family celebrations in our house were always performance opportunities. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. These weren't times for genuine connection, but rather carefully orchestrated displays of family success. My father would guide conversations toward everyone's accomplishments, and I quickly learned that having nothing significant to report meant becoming invisible at the table. "Mark just made junior partner," my father would announce proudly. Amelia's students had the highest reading scores in the district. He'd beam. When it came to me, there would be an awkward pause followed by, "Tessa is still exploring her options," as if my graphic design internship was just a phase I was going through. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. When I won a regional art competition, my parents didn't attend the ceremony. My father had an important client meeting, and my mother wouldn't drive there alone. Mark was too busy with law review, and Amelia had cheerleading practice. I stood alone, accepting my award, watching other families celebrating together. Yet somehow I still craved their approval. Each accomplishment, each small success I brought home like an offering, hoping this time it would be enough. It never was. When I received a scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the top art schools in the country, my father's response was to calculate how much more money I could have made with a business degree from University of Michigan. "You're throwing away your potential, Tessa," he said over dinner. "This art school nonsense will leave you waiting tables for the rest of your life." "James," my mother interjected softly, "the scholarship is quite prestigious." "Prestigious?" he scoffed. "Among what crowd, starving artists and coffee shop philosophers, no daughter of mine is going to waste 4 years on finger painting." I went anyway. It was my first real act of defiance, and it cost me. My father refused to contribute a penny toward my education, even for basic living expenses. I worked 2 jobs while maintaining a full course load, determined to prove him wrong. Those 4 years in Providence were transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued creativity, who saw my talent as something to nurture rather than suppress. My professors praised my unique perspective. My classmates respected my work, and I began to build confidence in my voice as a designer. Still, holidays were exercises in emotional endurance. I'd return home to Grand Rapids where nothing had changed. My father would interrogate me about job prospects, making it clear he expected me to come to my senses and apply to business school. Mark would patronizingly ask if I was still drawing, as if my intensive design program was equivalent to a child's coloring book. Amelia, always the peacekeeper, would try to change the subject when tensions rose, but never actually defended me. After graduation, I moved to Chicago and landed a junior designer position at a small but respected agency. When I called home with the news, my mother's first question was, "What's the salary?" When I told her, she made a small, disappointed sound. "Well, I suppose it's a start. Your father will want to know about benefits." Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up, eventually becoming senior designer, then creative director. I won industry awards, was featured in design publications, and finally took the leap to start my own small agency at 30. All this time, I kept trying to maintain connections with my family, though visits became less frequent and phone calls shorter. Each time I achieved something significant, I'd share the news with my family, hoping for just a glimmer of pride or support. Instead, my successes were diminished, compared unfavorably to Mark's latest promotion or Amelia's perfect children. The distance between us grew not just geographically, but emotionally. Chicago was only a few hours' drive from Grand Rapids, but it might as well have been another planet. I built a new life there with friends who celebrated my successes and supported me through failures. Yet I still couldn't let go of the fantasy that someday, somehow, I would earn my family's approval. That fantasy sustained me through countless disappointments, through birthdays remembered too late, through condescending comments about my little drawings, through family photos I wasn't included in because I couldn't make it home for the scheduled session. Never mind that I had a major client presentation that couldn't be moved. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs leading to that final breaking point. But at the time, I was still that little girl desperately seeking validation from people who were incapable of giving it. I just couldn't see that their approval wasn't withheld because I wasn't good enough, but because nothing would ever be good enough. And so, despite years of evidence to the contrary, I kept trying, kept reaching out, kept hoping, until that fateful Thanksgiving that changed everything. November in Chicago brings a particular kind of chill, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you crave warmth and connection. Maybe that's why, despite my better judgment, I found myself packing an overnight bag for the 3-hour drive to my parents' house in Grand Rapids for Thanksgiving. I had good news to share. My small design agency had just landed a contract with a major national retailer, the kind of client that could transform our business. After years of hustle, of late nights and tight budgets and constant worry, this felt like validation. Maybe, just maybe, this accomplishment would finally be enough for my family to see my career as legitimate. The drive to Michigan was filled with rehearsed conversations. I practiced how I'd casually mention the contract, downplaying it just enough to avoid seeming boastful while still conveying its significance. I imagined my father's grudging acknowledgement, perhaps even pride. I pictured my mother's surprise, maybe even an admission that she'd been wrong about my career choice. Snow flurries danced in my headlights as I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house was lit up, smoke curling from the chimney cars already lined the street. Mark and Catherine's luxury SUV, Amelia and Thomas's practical minivan. I was the last to arrive as usual. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my overnight bag and the bottle of expensive wine I'd brought, then headed toward the front door. The warmth that greeted me when I stepped inside was purely physical. My mother's hug was brief, perfunctory. "You're late," she said, taking the wine with a quick glance at the label. "Everyone's already having drinks in the living room." "Traffic was heavy," I explained. "Plus, I had to finish something for work before leaving." "Always work with you." She sighed as if my dedication to my career was an inconvenience rather than a success. "Your sister managed to get here by noon and she has 2 children to organize." I bit back a retort about how my deadline wouldn't wait just because it was a holiday. Instead, I hung up my coat and followed her toward the living room where voices and laughter flowed. The scene was picture perfect. My father holding court by the fireplace, Mark and Catherine on the love seat, Amelia and Thomas on the sofa with their children playing quietly nearby. It could have been a holiday commercial, everyone glowing in the firelight, drinks in hand, the air scented with turkey and cinnamon. "Look who finally made it," my father announced as I entered, his tone making it clear this was a criticism rather than a welcome. Mark raised his whiskey in my direction. "The prodigal daughter returns." "Sorry I'm late," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. The interstate was packed. "Well, you're here now," Amelia said, patting the space beside her. "Come sit. Catherine was just telling us about their new vacation home in Aspen." And just like that, I was absorbed into the familiar dynamic. Mark and Catherine dominated the conversation with tales of their latest acquisitions and accomplishments. My father asked probing questions about Mark's law firm, nodding approvingly at each answer. My mother fussed over Amelia's children, cooing about how talented and well-behaved they were. No one asked about my life in Chicago, my work, my friends, or the major client I was so excited about. I sat nursing a glass of wine, feeling like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong family gathering. As my mother left to check on dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom. Passing the kitchen, I overheard Mark's voice. "How long do you think Tessa will keep up this designer fantasy before she gets a real job?" My sister's laugh floated out. "You know how stubborn she is. Remember when she insisted on going to that art school?" "Your father still thinks that was the biggest mistake," my mother added. "Such a waste of potential. She could have done something meaningful." I froze in the hallway, their words hitting me like physical blows. After all these years, after all my hard work and success, they still saw my career, my passion, as a juvenile phase to be outgrown. Catherine's voice joined in. "It's so hard to explain what Tessa does when people ask. At least with teaching or law, people understand the value." "Well, not everyone can be successful like Mark," my mother sighed. "I just wish she'd settle down with someone decent. 32 and still single. People talk." I must have made a sound because suddenly the conversation stopped. I continued to the bathroom on autopilot, locking the door behind me. In the mirror, my face looked pale, eyes wide with hurt. I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady myself. Dinner was excruciating. I sat at the table, mechanically eating turkey that tasted like sawdust, smiling at appropriate intervals, while inside I was screaming. When the conversation turned to Mark's recent courtroom victory, I saw my opportunity. "I have some news too," I said during a brief lull. "My agency just signed a contract with Meridian Retail. It's a national campaign that will run for at least a year." There was a moment of silence before my father spoke. "Meridian, the department store chain." A small spark of hope lit within me. He recognized the name. "Yes, exactly. They're rebranding to appeal to younger demographics, and they chose our proposal over several larger agencies. It's a huge deal in the industry." My father took a sip of his wine, considering. Interesting timing. I read they're closing several locations next year. Risky client." Just like that, my achievement was dismissed, reframed as a potential failure. "Actually," I countered, unable to stop myself, They're strategically consolidating while expanding their online presence, which is exactly what our campaign addresses. Mark smirked. Well, not everyone can represent Fortune 500 companies in nine-figure deals like I closed last month. My mother jumped in quickly. Mark's firm is handling the Reynolds merger. It was in the Wall Street Journal. That's great, Mark. I said automatically, the words hollow in my mouth. But this is a significant achievement in my field. Of course it is, dear, my mother said with the same tone she used when Amelia's daughter showed her a finger painting. I felt something snap inside me. 6 years of building my business, of proving myself in a competitive industry, reduced to a pat on the head. You know, I said slowly, it would be nice if just once any of you would acknowledge that what I do has value. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. No one's saying it doesn't have value, Tessa, my father said finally. It's just not the same level of achievement as becoming a partner at Wellington and Pierce. He nodded toward Mark. Different fields, different measures of success, I insisted. Is it success, though? Mark asked, leaning forward. How much does this big contract actually pay enough to finally move out of that studio apartment? Heat rushed to my face. I live in a loft in River North, by choice, and my finances are none of your business. Now, my mother interjected. Let's not discuss money at the dinner table. Unless it's Mark's money, I muttered. Amelia cleared her throat. Speaking of your apartment, Tessa Lauren said she saw you with someone outside your building when she was in Chicago last month. Anyone special? Lauren was Amelia's college roommate who now lived in Chicago. The abrupt change of subject threw me. Probably just a friend, I said cautiously. Lauren said you looked intimate. Amelia pressed a small smile playing at her lips. Dark hair, beard, artistic type. With sudden clarity, I realized she was referring to Damien, a client I'd been having lunch with to discuss his project. The lunch had ended with a friendly hug outside my building, nothing remotely romantic, but I could see the direction this was heading. Just a client, I said firmly. She said he kissed you goodbye. Amelia continued, her eyes gleaming with the power of having information about my life. On the cheek, maybe. He's French and married and was in town for business. My father's expression darkened. Are you fraternizing with married men now, Tessa? The accusation hung in the air so absurd I almost laughed. It was a professional lunch with a client who happens to greet people with kisses on the cheek because he's European. There was nothing inappropriate about it. Catherine raised an eyebrow. Still, perception matters. In our circles, I'd never meet a male client alone. Mark's firm has strict protocols about that sort of thing. Well, good thing I don't work at a soul-crushing corporate law firm then. I snapped, my patience finally evaporating. In my circles, we treat people as professionals regardless of gender. There's no need for that tone, my father said sharply. Catherine is just pointing out how things work in the real world. The real world? I echoed, my voice rising. You mean your world, where success is measured in billable hours and golf club memberships, where appearances matter more than happiness, where art and creativity have no value unless they're hanging in your office to impress clients. That's enough, Tessa, my father warned. But years of suppressed frustration were pouring out. No, it's not enough. It's never been enough for any of you. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, your respect. I've built a successful business doing work I'm proud of. I've won awards. I've been published in industry magazines. But none of that matters because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. You're making a scene, my mother hissed, glancing nervously at Amelia's children who were watching wide-eyed from the kids' table. God forbid we have a real conversation for once instead of this performance we put on, I said, throwing my napkin on the table. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of having my life and my choices diminished. I'm tired of being the family disappointment when the only people I've ever disappointed are sitting at this table. If you can't control yourself, perhaps you should leave, my father said, his voice cold and final. I looked around the table, at my father's anger, my mother's embarrassment, Mark's smug superiority, Catherine's disdain, Amelia's wide eyes, Thomas's discomfort. Not one face showed understanding or support. You're right, I said, standing slowly. I should leave. Not just dinner, but this whole dysfunctional dynamic. I'm done trying to earn a place at a table where I'm not wanted. I walked out without another word, ignoring my mother's calls to come back, grabbing my coat and bag from the foyer, and stepping out into the cold night. Behind me, I could hear raised voices. My father and Mark probably discussing my inappropriate behavior, my mother trying to salvage the evening. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of tears and swirling snow. 3 hours alone on the interstate with nothing but my thoughts and the occasional semi-truck passing in the opposite direction. By the time I reached my loft, I was emotionally exhausted, but somehow clearer than I'd been in years. I'd finally said what I'd been holding back for so long. I'd finally acknowledged the truth of my family dynamic. It hurt. God, it hurt more than I could have imagined. But there was also a strange sense of relief. No more pretending. No more seeking approval that would never come. What I didn't know then was that the real blow was still to come. I spent the next 3 days in a strange limbo, alternating between empowerment over having finally stood up for myself and anxiety about the inevitable fallout. My phone remained silent. No calls from my mother asking if I'd arrived home safely. No texts from Amelia trying to smooth things over. The silence was both a relief and a new kind of pain. On Sunday evening, as I was preparing for the week ahead, organizing notes for Monday's client meetings, and trying to focus on work rather than family drama, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. My heart jumped into my throat. Part of me hoped for an apology or at least an acknowledgement of my feelings. Even as I thought it, I knew how unlikely that was. But hope is a persistent thing. I opened the message and stared at the words on the screen. We've all agreed, stay out of the family now. Just like that. 9 cold words that severed decades of connection, however flawed that connection had been. No explanation needed. No discussion. A unanimous family decision from which I had been excluded. My fingers felt numb as I typed the only response I could manage. Understood. I set the phone down carefully as if it might shatter, or perhaps as if I might. For several minutes I simply stood there in my kitchen, the phone on the counter, the text glowing up at me confirming what I had always feared deep down, that their love was conditional, that I was expendable, that blood ties could indeed be broken. The initial shock gave way to a pain so intense it was physical. My chest tightened, my breath came in short gasps, and my vision blurred with tears. I slid down to the kitchen floor back against the cabinets and let the sobs rack my body. All the years of seeking approval, of making excuses for their behavior, of telling myself that deep down they must love me, it all collapsed under the weight of those 9 words. I don't know how long I sat there on the cold tile, but eventually I managed to call my best friend Jade. We'd met in my first design job in Chicago, and she'd been my rock through countless ups and downs. Her voice on the phone was instantly concerned. "Tess, what's wrong? You sound terrible." The words spilled out between sobs. The Thanksgiving disaster, the text, my one-word reply. Jade didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over. Don't move." 30 minutes later, she was at my door with a bottle of wine and a fierce, protective expression. She enveloped me in a hug that contained more genuine warmth than I'd felt from my family in years. "Let me see it," she said after settling me on the couch. I handed her my phone and watched her face darken as she read the exchange. "Those absolute monsters," she muttered. "Who says that to their child? Any child, but especially someone like you." "Someone like me," I echoed. "Yes, Tess. Someone kind and talented and hardworking. Someone who has bent over backwards trying to please them while still staying true to herself." She set the phone down with disgust. "They don't deserve you. They never have." Her loyalty was a balm, but it couldn't completely ease the fundamental wound of being rejected by my own family. What was wrong with me that my own parents could discard me so easily? What kind of person was so unlovable that an entire family could unanimously vote them out? The next days passed in a fog of grief. Jade insisted on staying over that first night, making sure I ate something, and eventually fell into an exhausted sleep. The following morning, I went through the motions of normalcy. Showered, dressed, went to my office, but inside I felt hollow. I performed well enough in client meetings, my professional persona taking over when necessary, but back in my private office, I would find myself staring blankly at my computer screen, that text message replaying in my mind. At night, I'd scroll through old family photos on my phone, searching for clues I might have missed. There I was at graduation, standing slightly apart from everyone else. There was Christmas 3 years ago, my smile tight while everyone else looked relaxed. Birthday celebrations where I was an afterthought. Family vacations where I was included but somehow still separate. I deleted my parents and siblings from my social media accounts, unable to bear seeing their lives continue without me. But that didn't stop the painful discovery that came 2 weeks later when a college friend messaged me. "Saw your family's Christmas card photo. Thought you were going home for the holidays." Attached was an image of my parents, Mark and Catherine with their perfect children, Amelia and Thomas with theirs, all arranged artfully in front of my parents' fireplace. Everyone smiling, coordinated in festive red and green. No empty space to indicate anyone was missing. No visual acknowledgement that a daughter and sister had been erased. They hadn't just cut me out of their lives, they had rewritten the family narrative as if I had never existed. Christmas was the lowest point. I had declined invitations from friends insisting I was fine, that I needed time alone. In truth, I couldn't bear to put on a happy face or explain my situation to well-meaning acquaintances. Instead, I sat in my dark apartment, a half-eaten microwave dinner congealing on the coffee table, scrolling through Instagram, despite knowing it would hurt. And there they were, my family gathered around a laden table, raising glasses, opening gifts, continuing traditions I was no longer part of. Something shifted in me that night. As the tears dried on my face, I felt a new emotion rising to replace the crushing sadness. Anger. Not a hot, destructive rage, but something cooler and more clarifying. For the first time, I looked at those smiling social media images and saw the performance for what it was. The perfect family tableau was as carefully constructed as any advertising campaign designed to present an image with little connection to emotional reality. I had been trying to earn authentic love from people who trafficked in appearances. I had been seeking validation from those who valued conformity over individuality. I had been treating their approval as the measure of my worth when they were using metrics that had nothing to do with the person I truly was or wanted to be. That night, I stopped crying. Instead, I turned off my phone, opened my laptop, and began to plan. The new year arrived with a fresh blanket of snow across Chicago and a strange sense of possibility stirring within me. I stood on my small balcony just after midnight, champagne flute in hand, watching fireworks bloom over Lake Michigan. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than grief, a tentative hope, a flicker of determination. Later that day, Jade came over bearing bagels and a no-nonsense attitude. She found me surrounded by journals and sticky notes, mapping out goals and ideas on my living room wall. "Well, this is an improvement over the last time I saw you," she remarked, setting down breakfast. "What's all this?" "My life," I said simply. "The one I'm going to build without their approval." Jade raised her coffee in salute. "Now you're talking. But first we need to address something." She sat across from me, her expression serious. "You know this isn't about you, right? This whole situation, it's not because you're unlovable or did something wrong. It's about them and their toxic dynamics." I started to object, but she cut me off. "No, listen to me. I've watched for years as you twisted yourself into knots trying to earn their love. But people who make their love conditional on you fitting into their narrow mold don't actually love you. They love the idea of who they want you to be." Her words struck a chord, one that vibrated with both pain and truth. "I know that intellectually," I admitted, "but emotionally, it's going to take time," she finished. "Which is why I made you an appointment with Dr. Rivera next week." Dr. Lena Rivera was a therapist Jade had seen after her divorce. I started to protest that I didn't need therapy, but the words died on my lips. If I was honest with myself, I did need help untangling the knots of family conditioning that had shaped my self-perception for decades. That first session with Dr. Rivera was like lancing a wound, painful but necessary for healing to begin. She listened intently as I poured out my history, occasionally asking questions that led me to connections I hadn't seen before. "What I'm hearing," she said toward the end of our session, "is a pattern of emotional manipulation and conditional approval that began in childhood. Your achievements were minimized while your perceived failures were magnified. Your independence was treated as betrayal rather than healthy development. Your successes outside their prescribed path were reframed as poor choices. Hearing it summarized so clinically made me see my family dynamic with new clarity. Is that, is that emotional abuse? I asked hesitantly, the term feeling both too strong and frighteningly accurate. Family relationships exist on a spectrum, she replied carefully. But yes, consistently undermining someone's choices and achievements, withdrawing love as punishment, and ultimately rejecting them for maintaining their autonomy, these are emotionally abusive behaviors. The validation was both devastating and freeing. It wasn't all in my head. The pain I'd experienced was real and justified. In the weeks that followed, I committed to weekly therapy sessions while pouring myself into reimagining my life. I created a vision board, something I would have dismissed as silly before, filling it with images and words that represented my values rather than my family's. Creativity, authenticity, joy, community, freedom. I established clear boundaries, blocking my family's numbers and email addresses to remove the temptation to check for messages that wouldn't come. When a card arrived from my mother on my birthday in February, I returned it unopened. The handwriting on the envelope had triggered such an intense anxiety attack that I knew maintaining complete distance was necessary for my healing. Work became a form of therapy. My design agency had always been my passion, but now I approached it with a new sense of purpose. Without the nagging voice in my head constantly comparing my achievements to Mark's corporate success, I found myself taking creative risks I'd previously hesitated to pursue. I expanded my network, joining professional organizations and attending industry events I'd once avoided out of fear of not measuring up. At one such event, I met Sarah Chen, a 50-something creative director at a major agency who took an interest in my work. Over coffee, she shared her own journey of breaking free from family expectations to pursue her creative passion. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, she confided. First-generation immigrants with big dreams for their daughter. When I chose design instead, they didn't speak to me for 2 years. How did you reconcile? I asked, hope flickering. Her smile was sad but peaceful. We didn't, not really. They eventually resumed contact, but they never truly understood or valued my work. I had to find that validation elsewhere, in mentors, in colleagues, in my own satisfaction with what I created. Family of choice rather than family of origin. Sarah became that mentor for me, offering guidance, connections, and sometimes just a sympathetic ear from someone who truly understood. She invited me to teach a guest workshop at the Art Institute, introduced me to potential clients, and pushed me to enter my work in competitions I would have deemed beyond my reach before. Through Sarah, I also found a support group for adults experiencing family estrangement. The first meeting was terrifying. Walking into a community center room full of strangers felt like exposing my deepest wound to public view. But as others shared their stories, I felt a profound sense of recognition. Different details, different families, but the same core experience of conditional love withdrawn when they failed to conform to family expectations. The hardest part, said Miguel, an architect whose family had cut ties when he came out as gay, is letting go of the fantasy that they'll suddenly change, that one day they'll see you clearly and love you for who you are. Grieving that fantasy is almost harder than grieving the actual relationship. His words stayed with me, illuminating the difference between grieving my real family, flawed, judgmental, ultimately unable to accept me, and grieving the fantasy family I had always hoped they could become. As winter thawed into spring, I faced a crucial decision. A prestigious international design competition had opened applications seeking innovative brand identity concepts for a global conservation initiative. Winning would mean significant recognition in the design world, but the entry requirements were demanding. A comprehensive brand system including strategy documents, visual identity implementation examples, and a video presentation. The timeline would require full focus for months, eliminating any possibility of distractions. In my old life, I might have hesitated, wondering if such single-minded dedication to my hobby would further alienate my family. Now I submitted my application without a second thought. That decision, to fully commit to my path without looking over my shoulder for approval, would prove to be the turning point in both my career and my healing journey. The creative energy I poured into the international competition entry was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Freed from the constant undercurrent of seeking family approval, my work took on a new dimension of authenticity and boldness. The brief called for a brand identity that could unite diverse conservation efforts across continents while remaining culturally sensitive and visually distinctive. I immersed myself in research studying indigenous art forms, environmental symbolism, and sustainable design practices. My small team at the agency caught my enthusiasm, everyone contributing extra hours, not because I demanded it, but because the project ignited a collective passion. When the announcement came that we'd been shortlisted among 5 finalists from over 400 entries worldwide, our small office erupted in celebration. The final judging would happen in Barcelona, with each finalist presenting their concept to an international panel. "You're going to crush this," Jade declared as she helped me pack for the trip. "They won't know what hit them." The win was surreal. Standing on a stage in Barcelona, camera flashes popping as I accepted the award, my voice steady as I thanked my team. The jury citation praised our concept for revolutionary thinking that challenges conventional approaches while honoring traditional wisdom. The very qualities my family had dismissed, my creative perspective, my willingness to forge my own path, were now being celebrated at the highest levels of my industry. The recognition brought immediate practical changes. Our small agency's phones started ringing with inquiries from clients who had previously been beyond our reach. I hired 3 new designers and moved the studio to a larger space in the West Loop. Industry publications requested interviews, and design schools invited me to speak to their students. But the most significant changes were happening internally. With each success that came without my family's validation, the grip of their judgment loosened. I began to recognize my own worth through the eyes of clients who valued my vision, colleagues who respected my approach, and students who were inspired by my journey. 6 months after winning the competition, I was featured in Design Magazine's annual Visionaries issue. The profile included a photo of me in our new studio surrounded by my team, all of us laughing at something off camera. It captured exactly what I wanted to project, not just professional success, but genuine joy and connection. When the issue hit newsstands, my inbox and social media filled with congratulations from friends and colleagues. Part of me, a smaller part than before but still there, waited for some acknowledgement from my family. Surely they would see this and feel, what pride, regret? Something that might crack open a door to reconciliation. No message came, and surprisingly, I found I could accept that without spiraling into self-doubt. Their silence no longer defined my worth. This newfound emotional strength extended to my personal life as well. For years, I had approached dating with the same approval-seeking mindset that characterized my family relationships. I was attracted to emotionally unavailable men whose validation I had to earn, recreating the familiar dynamic of never quite being enough. Now, when I met Ryan at a charity auction for arts education, I recognized something different. A children's book illustrator with kind eyes and an easy laugh, he was genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings, not just my achievements or appearance. Our conversations flowed without the undercurrent of judgment I had come to expect from relationships. "You know what I like about you," he said on our 3rd date as we walked along the lake shore. "You're unapologetically passionate about what matters to you. It's refreshing." The comment caught me off guard, not because it wasn't true, but because he saw as a strength what my family had always treated as a failing. As spring turned to summer, my life developed a rhythm that felt both productive and nourishing. Weekdays were filled with creative work at the agency, now thriving with a roster of clients who shared our values. Evenings and weekends were balanced between time with Ryan dinners, with friends who had become like family, and personal creative projects I pursued purely for joy. In July, I signed up for a weekend art retreat in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Ryan was traveling for a book tour, and I craved some quiet time in nature. The retreat center was rustic with simple cabins nestled among pine trees and a large studio space where participants gathered for workshops. The first morning, the instructor, a renowned watercolorist, had us begin with an exercise from childhood. "Finger painting," she announced, rolling out large sheets of paper and setting out trays of paint. "No brushes, no tools, just your hands and the colors." My initial reaction was resistance. I was a professional designer with sophisticated techniques, not a kindergartner. But as I hesitantly dipped my fingers into the cool, slick paint and made the first marks on paper, something unexpected happened. A long-forgotten joy bubbled up, the pure sensory pleasure of creation, without judgment or purpose. By the end of the session, I was laughing, my hands and forearms streaked with color, my paper filled with swirls and splashes that had no commercial application but contained more genuine expression than much of my professional work. I photographed the finished piece, not to share on social media or include in my portfolio, but simply to remember the feeling of creating solely for the joy of it. Back in Chicago, I found myself volunteering at an arts program for teens from underserved communities. Many of these young people reminded me of myself, creative, seeking validation, unsure if their talents had value. Teaching them techniques was straightforward. Helping them believe in their unique voices was the greater gift. "My dad says art isn't a real job," said Zoe, a particularly talented 16-year-old, her eyes fixed on her sketch to avoid showing her hurt. The comment struck a familiar chord, but instead of the usual pain, I felt a surge of protective determination. "Let me tell you something about real jobs," I told her. "The realest job you can have is one that allows you to express your authentic self while contributing something meaningful to the world. For some people, that's medicine or law or teaching. For others, it's art. The only person who can decide what's real for you is you." The words were as much for my younger self as for Zoe, a truth I had fought hard to learn. Not everything was smooth sailing, of course. Healing isn't linear, and there were still days when the absence of family hit me hard. My parents' wedding anniversary, my brother's birthday, the first Thanksgiving after the estrangement. These triggered waves of grief that temporarily pulled me under. The most challenging moment came unexpectedly at a design conference in September. I was at the coffee station during a break between sessions when I looked up and saw Mark across the room. My brother was in deep conversation with someone in a business suit, likely a potential client for his firm. He hadn't noticed me yet. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My cup overflowed with coffee as I stood frozen, staring. Then panic took over. I abandoned the cup and hurried in the opposite direction, heart-pounding, hands shaking. I locked myself in a bathroom stall, trying to control my breathing as memories flooded back. Childhood slights, adolescent comparisons, adult condescension, all culminating in that final rejection. When I returned to Chicago, I shared the incident with Dr. Rivera. "Your reaction was a normal trauma response," she assured me. "But it also reveals how much emotional power your family still holds over you." "I thought I was doing better," I said, frustrated by what felt like a setback. "You are," she said firmly. "But healing from family trauma isn't about never feeling pain when confronted with reminders. It's about developing resilience, the ability to feel the pain without being defined by it." We worked on strategies for potential future encounters, practical steps to ground myself if panic arose, but the most powerful insight came toward the end of our session. "Tessa, you've created a beautiful life filled with meaningful work, authentic relationships, and genuine joy," Dr. Rivera said. "That's not despite your family's rejection. In many ways, it's because of it. Their rejection forced you to find validation from within rather than seeking it externally. That's a gift, albeit a painful one." The perspective shift was profound. What if the text that had once devastated me, "We've all agreed, stay out of the family now," wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning of a better one? What if being cast out was the very thing that allowed me to finally become fully myself? With that realization, I felt another piece of the heavy weight I'd carried for so long begin to lift. 18 months had passed since that life-changing text when I received an unexpected email from my sister Amelia. Seeing her name in my inbox sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system, not quite fear, but a visceral wariness. I hesitated before opening it, centering myself with the grounding techniques Dr. Rivera had taught me. Whatever this message contained, I reminded myself it couldn't take away the life and sense of self I had built. The email was brief and carefully neutral in tone. "Tessa, I'm reaching out because Mom has been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The prognosis is good. They caught it early, but she'll be undergoing surgery next month followed by radiation. I thought you should know. Also, I've seen your work featured in several publications. Congratulations on your success. Amelia. No mention of the estrangement of my father's text of the family decision to cut me out. Just this information dropped into my life as if we'd been in regular contact all along. I showed the email to Ryan that evening as we cooked dinner together in my apartment. Wow, he said, reading it twice. That's a lot to process. How do you feel about it? It was a good question, one I was still sorting through myself. Concerned about Mom, of course, I said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. Cancer is scary even with a good prognosis, but also suspicious of the timing. They've seen my success, and suddenly I exist again. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Do you think they want something from you? Not directly, but family image has always been everything to them. Maybe having an accomplished daughter is now more valuable than having a conformist one. I let a week pass before responding, consulting with both Dr. Rivera and my estrangement support group about healthy boundaries. Finally, I crafted a careful reply, Amelia. Thank you for letting me know about Mom's diagnosis. I'm sorry to hear she's facing this health challenge, but glad the prognosis is positive. Please let her know she's in my thoughts. While I appreciate the information, I need to be clear that this doesn't automatically reset our family situation. The decision to cut me out of the family was made unilaterally with no attempt at discussion or resolution. That breach of trust has consequences that can't simply be ignored now that circumstances have changed. I wish Mom all the best with her treatment and recovery. Tessa. I didn't expect a response, but one came quickly. Can we talk? Just you and me. Video call. After another consultation with Dr. Rivera about managing expectations and maintaining boundaries, I agreed to a 20-minute call the following evening. Seeing Amelia's face on my screen was jarring. She looked the same, yet somehow different, perhaps more tired than I remembered. She sat in what appeared to be her home office, family photos visible on the wall behind her. You look good, Tessa, she said after our awkward greetings. Really good. Thanks, I replied, waiting rather than filling the silence with nervous chatter as I might have once done. So, Mom's doing okay, all things considered. The doctors are optimistic. She twisted her wedding ring as she spoke, a nervous habit from childhood. She asks about you, you know. Does she? I kept my tone neutral. Yes, she saw that spread in Design magazine. Dad has it in his study, though he won't admit he keeps it there. This revelation was genuinely surprising. Dad has my magazine feature? Amelia nodded. He doesn't talk about it, but I've seen it on his desk, and Mom keeps clippings from any publication that mentions you. I absorbed this information, uncertain what to make of it. That's interesting, but it doesn't change what happened. I know, Amelia sighed. But with Mom's diagnosis, everyone's been thinking more about family, about what matters. Maybe this could be a time for healing. Healing requires acknowledgement of harm, I said carefully. No one has even mentioned the text Dad sent, let alone apologized for it or for years of dismissing my choices. Amelia looked uncomfortable. You know, Dad, he's not good at admitting mistakes. That's not a quirky personality trait, Amelia. It's emotional immaturity that hurts people. He's from a different generation, she began, but I cut her off. Please don't make excuses. If he wants to reconnect, he needs to take responsibility for his actions. Same with Mom, same with you and Mark. Her expression hardened slightly. We weren't the ones who stormed out of Thanksgiving dinner making a scene. And there it was. The familiar family narrative where standing up for myself was reframed as inappropriate behavior. Is that really how you remember it? I asked. Because what I remember is being constantly belittled until I finally said enough. What I remember is overhearing all of you mocking my career and my life choices. What I remember is being told by text that I was unanimously voted out of the family without even a conversation. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. How was it then? I challenged. Tell me your version. She hesitated, then sighed. Look, things got heated. Dad was upset. We all said things we didn't mean. Did you disagree with his decision to send that text? Her silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said quietly. You all agreed, just like he said. It was a difficult time, she said defensively. And now things are different. Mom's sick. The holidays are coming up. She wants to see you. I'll send flowers and a card, I said firmly. But I'm not coming home for the holidays to pretend everything's fine when nothing has been resolved. Can't you just let it go for Mom's sake with everything she's going through? The old guilt tactics so familiar they almost made me laugh despite the seriousness of the situation. Her health challenges don't erase what happened to Amelia, and using her illness to pressure me isn't fair to either of us. The call ended shortly after with Amelia clearly frustrated but unable to counter my boundaries. I felt drained but also strangely empowered. I had stated my position clearly without anger or defensiveness, maintaining my boundaries while still expressing appropriate concern for my mother's health. The next day, I sent a large flower arrangement to my mother, along with a card expressing wishes for her recovery. It was the compassionate thing to do, and it allowed me to honor my genuine concern without compromising my boundaries. The following weeks brought scattered updates from Amelia about our mother's surgery and initial recovery. I responded with appropriate concern, but maintained my distance. When an invitation to the family Christmas gathering arrived in November, I declined politely but firmly. My holiday season instead was filled with chosen family, a Friendsgiving at Jade's apartment Christmas Eve with Ryan and his warmly chaotic family, who welcomed me without reservation New Year's with my studio team at a cabin in Wisconsin, where we combined relaxation with a vision retreat for the coming year. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that my parents were sharing news of my professional accomplishments in their social circles, claiming proud involvement in my success, despite years of dismissing my career. The hypocrisy was irritating, but ultimately not surprising. Image had always mattered more than reality in the Wilson family. I had learned to find peace with this contradiction. My biological family might claim connection to me when it suited them, but I no longer needed their acknowledgement to validate my existence or my choices. The family I had built through friendship, love, and mutual respect was more authentic and nourishing than the one I had been born into. As the second anniversary of my estrangement approached, I found myself not dreading the date, but reflecting on how far I had come. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, perhaps it never would, but it had transformed into something more like an old scar than an open wound. A mark of survival, rather than a source of ongoing hurt. The annual Design Excellence Awards ceremony fell exactly 2 years and 1 month after my father's text. Held in the grand ballroom of Chicago's historic Palmer House Hotel, it was the industry's most prestigious regional event, bringing together creative professionals from across the Midwest. My agency was nominated in 3 categories, including Designer of the Year, an individual honor I had never expected to be considered for. As I dressed for the evening in my hotel room, smoothing the fabric of my emerald green gown, I reflected on the symmetry of the moment. 2 years ago, I had been shattered by rejection from my family. Tonight, I was being celebrated by my professional community for exactly the path they had dismissed. Ryan adjusted his tie in the mirror beside me, catching my eye with a warm smile. Nervous? A little, I admitted, but good nervous, excited. "You've got this," he said, kissing my temple carefully to avoid disturbing my makeup. "Whatever happens with the awards, you've already won by building something true to yourself." My team had reserved a table near the stage, all of us dressed in our finest, and riding the high of being recognized among the industry's best. As we sipped champagne and chatted with colleagues from other agencies, I felt a profound sense of belonging that had nothing to do with bloodlines and everything to do with shared passion and mutual respect. When they announced my name for Designer of the Year, the room erupted in applause. In that moment of walking to the stage, accepting the elegant glass trophy, looking out at a sea of faces genuinely happy for my success, I felt a completion of the journey that had begun with that devastating text message. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice steady, despite the emotion swelling in my chest. "This recognition means more than I can express, especially coming from peers whose work I deeply admire." I went on to thank my team mentors like Sarah and Ryan for his unwavering support. Then I added something I hadn't planned. "I also want to acknowledge that the path to finding your authentic creative voice isn't always straightforward or supported by everyone in your life. To anyone struggling to believe in their vision when others don't see it, keep going. Your unique perspective is precisely what the world needs. The after-party was a whirl of congratulations and photographs. As I was chatting with the head of a partner agency, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Congratulations, Tessa." I turned to find my father standing there looking somehow both exactly the same and subtly different, perhaps slightly older, slightly less certain than the authoritative figure of my memory. "Dad," I said, too surprised to manage anything more eloquent, "what are you doing here?" "I was in Chicago for a conference," he said, his discomfort evident in his stiff posture. "I saw the announcement about the awards in the business section. Thought I'd stop by." The head of the partner agency tactfully excused himself, leaving us in an island of awkward silence amid the celebratory noise. "Congratulations," my father repeated. "That was quite an honor they gave you." "Thank you," I replied, still processing his unexpected presence. "Your mother keeps a file of all your press mentions," he offered, as if this somehow made up for everything. "She's very interested in your career these days." I nodded, waiting rather than filling the silence. "You look well," he continued when I didn't speak. "Successful." "I am," I confirmed simply. He cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've been too rigid in our thinking about your career choice." It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was as near to an admission of error as my father had ever come. "It was never about my career choice," I said quietly. "It was about conditional love, about respect, about accepting me as an autonomous adult with my own path." He shifted uncomfortably. "Families are complicated." "They don't have to be," I countered. "Not when there's genuine respect and acceptance." "Your mother would like to see you," he said, changing tactics. "She's doing better now after the treatments. The prognosis is excellent." "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "So you'll come visit?" He made it sound like the natural conclusion. "Dad, you sent me a text telling me I was out of the family. All of you agreed to that, remember? That doesn't just go away because now you've decided my success makes me acceptable again." His expression tightened. "You're going to hold on to that forever. People say things they don't mean when they're angry." It wasn't a momentary outburst. It was a considered message sent days after our argument stating a unanimous family decision. I kept my voice calm but firm. "And in the 2 years since, not one of you has acknowledged how deeply hurtful that was or taken responsibility for it." Ryan approached, sensing the tension. I introduced him briefly, watching my father's assessing gaze take in Ryan's artistic appearance, so different from the corporate polish of Mark's world. "We should rejoin your team," Ryan said diplomatically. "They're waiting to take group photos with the award." I nodded, then turned back to my father. "If you and Mom genuinely want to rebuild a relationship, it needs to start with acknowledgement of what happened and how it affected me, not just showing up when it's convenient and expecting to pick up as if nothing happened." "And if we do that?" he asked, his tone suggesting he found the requirement unreasonable. "Then we can talk about moving forward slowly with clear boundaries and expectations on both sides." He nodded stiffly, looking more like a lawyer concluding difficult negotiations than a father reconnecting with his daughter. "I should let you get back to your celebration," he said finally. "Goodbye, Dad," I replied, turning to rejoin my team, my chosen family who stood waiting with genuine smiles and open affection. As Ryan and I walked away, he squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? My father had appeared unexpectedly on what should have been a purely joyful night. He had offered no real apology, no genuine acknowledgement of harm done. Yet I felt none of the crushing inadequacy or desperate need for approval that had characterized our interactions for decades. "Yes," I said, surprised by the truth of it. "I really am." The encounter had clarified something important. I no longer needed their validation to feel complete. Their approval or disapproval had lost its power to define my worth. The life I had built, my thriving agency, my meaningful relationships, my creative fulfillment, was enough. I was enough. That night, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was, I realized that the rejection that had once shattered me had ultimately set me free. Free to discover my own definitions of success and family, free to create connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation, free to live authentically without apology. The healing journey wasn't complete, perhaps it never would be entirely. Family wounds leave deep impressions that can be triggered in unexpected moments. But I had learned to carry those wounds without being defined by them, to honor my past, without being imprisoned by it. As I raised a glass with my team celebrating our collective achievement, I silently thanked that devastating text message for forcing me to find my own path, my own voice, my own family of choice. Sometimes rejection isn't an ending, but a redirection toward a life more true, more full, more genuinely yours than you ever imagined possible. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between maintaining toxic family relationships or choosing your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life journeys of healing and self-discovery. And remember, sometimes the family we create through love and mutual respect is more nurturing than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that looks like for you.